Okay guys, this is just going to be a quick video. I've got a little bit of more progress done on the car. Some of you guys saw in the last video I had been doing some ECU work. That is more or less completed now. The ECU is in the car starts and runs just fine. It actually runs better than it did before, which is really good. The idle quality is dramatically improved. It's just all around a better setup. So one thing that we didn't talk about last time was there's a couple of things that you have to make this ECU work. Well, just not things that you necessarily have to have, but some of the things that'll make your life easier. So you can see ECU is installed. Notice all the wiring that is going into it is blue. That is an AEM patch harness that I've got installed in there. You can see the original ECU plugs are a little further up in there. Because I rerouted or relocated my ECU to the center of the car, it made a lot more sense for me to get one of those, because you can see that the ECU wiring is way tucked up in there, so it's nearly impossible for me to repin any of the things that need repinned. And since the stock harness is brittle anyway, I really didn't want to be messing around trying to repin the factory harness. I've already broken wires off because of how old it is. I mean, you got to remember this is a harness from a 96, 97 car, so it's pretty old. So anyway, you can see some of the pins are out there. That's just pins that weren't needed, or things that got moved around. The ones that are just hanging there, I will heat shrink. That's what that is sitting there, and then just kind of leave up in there. So I've got a couple more things done. I relocated pin 85 to pin 73. That's not something that most people are going to ever need to do, but I've got a spooling up speed density cable installed here now. You can see the plugs there. And I've got a GM 3-bar map sensor up here, and that runs through this harness to where the original mass airflow pin 85 for barometer would have been. So we just used the existing wiring, and I moved that to pin 73 for manifold absolute pressure sensor. And then I've got my GM intake air temperature sensor mounted there. So pretty decent setup. That should have let me eliminate all of this old MAF stuff. That's huge restriction of the intake, so I'll keep this around probably just in case I ever need to use it for some reason, but more than likely it'll just sit on a shelf. But the biggest thing that I've been working on, and it's not completely done yet, is the fan controller setup. So one thing that I didn't know when I shot the last video about using an Evo 8 ECU in these cars is that their fan controls are different. So with an Evo 8 or with an Evo 4, 5, or 6, excuse me, or a Mirage ECU, the way the fan triggers work is you've got your fan wires off of the ECU, and when the ECU wants to activate the fans, it energizes a wire with 12 volts. It comes out here to the fuse box and triggers a relay, which kicks on, and then that gives the fan 12 volts and it starts. It's a really simple setup. Evo 8s are not that way. Lancers, Evo 8s, any of the newer Mitsubishis, they use this fan controller. So I just finished getting this this wired in, sort of. It's not completely done, but I finished the base wiring. It's got power and ground now. You can see the fan controllers right there. I actually made this fan controller harness using pigtails that I got from the junkyard. So how this works is really simple. Instead of outputting 12 volts when the ECU wants to kick the fan on, it actually sends a data signal. And that data signal is received by this fan control box here. Evo 8 owners will recognize this. These actually had a recall on them. They were failing. on the earlier year Evos, but it's pretty easy to find these in pool yards. I actually found this one in an Outlander, and it was near perfect. Most of them had corrosion. That one actually is like, it looks perfect. Like, you would think that this is plastic, but it's actually a metal box. It just looks it looks pristine. I'm going to assume that this one was a recalled one that had been swapped out, because that looks way too new. But anyway, how the box works is it receives power and ground and signal. It's only got 3 wires. So what you do is, if you want to make your own harness, it's really simple. Grab the pigtail and as much of the wiring as you can get. I actually have more than enough here. So take the original ground wire, which is the black wire. You can see this is the original Mitsubishi wire right here. And I crimped on a ring terminal, and then I just grounded it right here. There was a bolt hole already there. Who knows what it was for? It was probably something to do with the original battery mount, but I cut all that off and did a horrible job of cleaning it up. But most of that's just dust, so don't judge me. But anyway, I grounded that right there. And then the original power wire, which I want to say is blue. I think I've got a couple of extra pigtails that I grabbed from the yard while I was out there. Here's another one of the fan wires. Yeah, here we go. So the blue wire, that's your power wire. You can see you've got black, blue, and then a smaller signal wire. So the black is your ground, obviously. The blue is the power wire. So for the power wire, what I did was I went to the auto parts store, and I grabbed the heaviest gauge fuse holder that I could find. That's waterproof. So I've got this waterproof fuse holder. I've got that spliced in with a weatherproof heat shrink splice. And then that gets run straight into my 12-volt battery terminal right here, which is really close to that bracket, but it will not actually hit, hopefully. Anyway, so yeah, that runs straight into the battery terminal. Now, you don't have to put a fuse holder on here. The factory runs it through a fusible link, but because I'm not running through a fusible link, I'm putting a fuse holder on here. Disclaimer, if you don't put some kind of fuse in line, that's how things catch fire, so I wouldn't do that. But anyway, so that's the 12-volt signal, and then I've got a 40-amp fuse in there. I'm not really sure what the fusible link is rated for, so I'm just putting a big fuse in there. Considering the size of the wiring, I mean, that is a heavy gauge wire, so I'm going to assume that it pulls some pretty big amps. But anyway, so yeah, 40 amp, I'm hoping will do it. And then lastly, you've got your signal wire. So that's the smallest wire that comes off of there. I extended that, and then I grabbed an old plug off of one of the spare wiring harnesses I have laying around. These plugs are used everywhere on Mitsubishis. So I spliced this in line, and then this gets run to... Oh man, I can't think of what ECU pin it is. But anyway, this gets run to the fan switch on the ECU. It's really easy to spot on the pinout. So that's the data wire that goes to the fan controller. So I haven't tested this part yet. All I have to do to finish testing is actually run a wire from the ECU to this plug here that I added on. And I'm actually using the male side of this plug. I've got a couple of broken ABS sensors laying around that use this plug. So I'm going to cut an ABS sensor up and then use that as the wiring for part of it. And then I'll just run a wire around through and into the ECU. So that's pretty simple. It's just time consuming. But I do know that this works because when these fan controllers fail, usually it's the signal part that fails, and then the fan gets stuck on. So because this fan receives power all the time, if it's not getting a data signal from the ECU, it'll just run. And we know that that works because if I pop this fuse in here, there you go. So there it is. I said it couldn't be done. Here it is working. So anyway, so I'll get that wired up here in a little bit, and I'll do a test again. With EvoScan, you can trigger a lot of the sensors in the car. So I'll just grab EvoScan and hook that up to the car, and then see if I can trigger the fan to come on with that. But I have no doubt that it'll work. We've already verified the continuity between the pins on another buddy's Evo 8, so we know that it's the right wiring. I just have to actually do it. But the fan controller on the Evo 8 controls both the radiator and the AC fan, so that's something I actually have to deal with still. I've got the wiring here. This is the AC fan wiring from the Outlander, from a Lancer, from whatever car I took it off of at the pull yard. So basically, this goes into this plug on the side down here. My wire's caught, but right here there's another plug on the side. So then I'll run this wiring out and around here to this Evo AC fan. These are weird fans. I don't know why they wired them the way they did. But normally you would have a power and a ground wire for the fan, and then I assumed that this was the wire that triggered the speed. Nope, it's not. That's not that simple. This is the ground wire shared, and then this is two different speed wires. So a lot of guys were having problems with this fan not working on their cars. It took me a few minutes of looking at the wiring diagrams to figure out that these are just two different windings in the fan motor, and then this is the ground for the both of them. One of these is the low RPM wire, and the other is the high RPM wire. The low RPM wire triggers first, obviously, to get the fans running on low speed, but the high RPM wire is powered as well as the low RPM wire for high speed. So you've got both windings in the motor receiving power. So that's something that you guys should probably note if you want to mess with the speeds. I actually just took one 12-volt wire that came from the original Mirage ECU, or relay, I mean. Mirages only had high speed options on their fans. They didn't have variable speeds like the Evos did. So just to make it simple, I just used the original 12-volt wire and powered both windings of the motor, and that makes it work just fine. So that's what I did. If you guys might want to just do the same thing. I don't think it's really worth wiring up the fan speeds, especially on a modified car. You pretty much just want high speed all the time. And that's what I was going to originally do with the old Evo 4 fan, but it just wasn't practical. Like, there was no way to take that data signal and use it to trigger a relay. So it was just easier to add the fan controller and fan in this case. And this is an Evo 8 fan. I didn't mention that before, but this is an Evo 8 fan on an Evo 4 radiator. A lot of Evo 8 guys use this radiator because of the coolant inlet up here is over here instead of over here, so that gives them more room for their turbo kits. But one thing to note is the fan mounts are different. This here is the only original location fan tab. This one and the two lower ones we cut off and re-welded into place. That's why this fan is blingy and silver. I was going to just shoot it black, but we thought, we shot the rest of the engine bay in that silver, and I had some laying around. Like, whatever, I'll just paint it silver. So, anyway, that's really about it. Hopefully, I'll have this data wire run in the next couple of hours and be able to test that. And once we verify that that is working, then it's time to start tinkering with the speed density tune. And as you can see, it's already all set up for speed density, so pretty much just have to do it. Anyway, stay tuned for next time, guys. Hopefully more riveting information. Sorry if this is kind of a more boring video, but it's info that I think will help a lot of guys. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time.